All righty. What's happening, everyone? This is HR Pod Squad, new show with some podcasters from our space. We're going to talk about topics from HR to HR tech today, and with our fellow Pod Squad, George. Welcome to LaRocque from the HR Market Watch podcast. What's up, George?
Hey, thanks for having me here. And Hey, guys.
You like that new nickname I gave you?
I've heard them all. I think I've heard them all. I like it. No theme music, though. I thought with the Pod Squad, there might be some we
need a theme song. Yeah. Joey, by the way, I like your theme song. Joey Price from Business Life and Coffee. He's got that pretty catchy tune on there.
Thank you.
How's it go? You want to sing a bar there?
Say what now?
So, how's it go?
Oh, I'll build a better life with your boy Joey Price.
Hey, get one of those. And our buddy over here, Matt Lozar from Secrets of Staffing podcast and Haley Marketing Group. What's up, Matt?
Not much, Chris. Excited to be here on a Friday.
Yeah, is that your studio?
It is our podcast studio, actually. Yeah, we commandeered some space and don't let anyone else in.
Nice. All right, so we got some topics today. I want to just go over briefly. We'll talk about the big tech guys, Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn. There's some news about them in the last month or so. We'll talk about the new voice apply that McDonald's has, which I thought was really interesting. We'll talk about the California rules about the new gig economy workers. Definitely some controversy there, as well as some other topics as well. So, guys, let's start out with the McDonald's story. For those of you who don't know, let me just read something about what's going on here. So, Alexa helped get me a job at McDonald's. With spoken words like those, Amazon Alexa or rival Google Assistant can lend a hand, or rather a voice, as you tried to land work at the Chicago-based food chain. So they announced something called Apply Through. It's an Alexa or Google Assistant skill, which they say is the world's first, and I think it is. And if you can use your own voice to start the apply process on these devices overall. So, my reaction to this was like, I was waiting for this to happen. And I think that you're going to see now a slew of especially high volume employers start to adopt new technology like this. So what are you guys' thoughts? Who wants to start?
Well, I like the fact that I can. I was saying I like the fact that I could apply to a job in my boxers. You watch Sports Center, and then I think I should get a job, and there you go. I can apply on with Siri.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you mention the technology behind it, Chris?
You know what? Paradox is behind it. Olivia, one of them. Aaron Mikos messaged me. He said that they're a part of it. So at HR Tech, I'm going to interview them and get more details on what they actually did there. But I'm really curious to hear about that. I actually I emailed McDonald's, the press rep from the release, and they didn't want to talk about it. So I did hear back from them, but no go.
Yeah. I think it's the future. We're going to see a lot more of this. We're going to see a lot of cross-channel communication becoming the norm. I would say this time next year, it'll be normal for candidates to initiate a process like that, whether it's on Alexa or one of the assistants, or take it over to WhatsApp or any communication channel, text, etc. And right now we're very text focused here, and I think this is where everything's going. It's exciting, and it's great for Paradox. I mean, that it's I think other employers you'll see will start to pay attention, and like now Burger King needs one, right? Like McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Matt,
we were talking about last year about, we were joking, Alexa, find me a job. And coming from staffing, I could definitely see it. What's my shift going to be today, or where do I have to go to work if I'm working for a staffing agency or anyone? Do I need to go? Which factory I need to go to, which healthcare facility, what time am I working? And options might just show up in your email or texted to your phone. So McDonald's in the apply through it's a very logical first step here.
Yeah, Jeremy Roberts says, "Hey Jeremy, thanks for coming on. This will weed out all the people you can't understand in the drive-through lines. Alexa will never understand them."
Are there any HR implications? I mean, I guess we've been doing, text apply and things like that for a while, but I'm just wondering if this is a new frontier with like compliance.
Somebody did mention like about GDPR, like this wouldn't fit with GDPR because there's no way to, I guess, acknowledge or whatever, that you're sending information in or something. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, how do you get opt-in permission using voice? You're gonna have to basically agree. You're gonna have to ask a question maybe around that. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's something to be need to determine, I guess.
From an HR perspective, I think there might be the complication of just how do you manage this at scale? At what point is there the human interaction of going through these voice recordings, or maybe they're voice to text, but also at the same time, if you're listening to someone, you could say, oh, well, I don't like their voice, or I don't think this person would be a great fit based on how they sound. And so you might have people being shortlisted because they have a voice that people like, or just written off because they have a voice that people don't. So there could be a subtle form of discrimination there, but who knows? I'd like to see this play out.
Yeah. I don't see the GDPR thing because, the way it works, in order to do this, like I agree on the scale issue, but to the previous point, the GDPR thing, you have to have the skill, you have to like enable the skill to ask the question to apply. It's like triple opt-in, right? Like you've got to like initiate the whole thing. They're not contacting you, you're contacting them. So right. I think the questions about how long they're keeping your data, and how they're using it, that's not any different than any other GDPR situation any employer has if they plan to use this outside the US.
Yeah, and the skill is just what, the phrase that you're using? I don't know the details behind all this, but is that what the skill is?
Yeah, like if you want to do anything outside the norm on Alexa, you have to go into that. There's an app, and you have to enable the skill. So McDonald's has a skill. It's called a skill. It's like the apply for a job skill or something like that. And it's not hard to do, but you're even if they found a way to make that skill live for everyone, you're initiating this, not McDonald's. Like, that would be creepy if McDonald's was like coming over everybody's Alexas with, hey, you want to apply for a job? We've been listening. We heard you're out of work.
That would be a serious concern for me.
It says once you start the apply process on there, then they text you. They ask for your mobile number so they can text you a link to their national job board where you can apply in a more formal fashion, I guess, overall. So it's a good lead gen for getting candidates on board here, which is the point. I don't think you're ever gonna be able to. Well, I think you could eventually apply to a job by saying, hey, use my LinkedIn profile to apply. Maybe something like that, right?
Yeah.
From a voice perspective.
Yeah. Well, I know there are HR systems like I saw a demo 2 years ago of Dayforce, Ceridian's HCM platform, and you could check your PTO balance, you could request PTO, you could ask to swap a shift, things like that. So it could get there. I mean, it could definitely get there. This sounds like a first step on the whole hiring frontier.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a little landmark moment I wanted to highlight on the show today overall. All right. So let's talk about the big tech guys. So Google was in the news this month a couple ways. So number one, Google for Hire shut down. They're pulling back on that. And then the EU complaints over in Europe there among the job boards and Google for Jobs. So that's going on. To me, if I'm a job board, I'm not complaining about Google for Jobs. I mean, it's free traffic, and it's replaced the Indeed free traffic I used to have, which I no longer do overall. And it just seems like over in Europe, they're really trying to protect their moats around their businesses overall. Any thoughts?
I was surprised Google hire got moonlighted going that way. That just, it seemed to get a lot of publicity, and we didn't see it a lot in staffing with our companies, but in HR it seemed maybe the price point was too low in terms of what an ATS needed to be, and Google just didn't see the ROI there. Like that, it seemed to make a lot of sense in terms of a database and scheduling and automating a lot of tasks to make it more efficient. But them essentially taking away support September, essentially taking the product away next September, that seemed like a pretty big move by Google to get out of that game.
Yeah, and they keep doing this. They're hurting their brand, I think. I mean, they keep taking away products that they're pushing out there. I mean, the expectation now is that I don't know if any product is going to be here in the future, right? I mean, I'm not going to say now that Google for Jobs is always going to be there, because you just don't have that confidence anymore.
Yeah. When companies come in from outside the space, they learn pretty quickly that hiring's complicated, and it really wasn't an ATS. It was glue in between the Google suite for as you mentioned, scheduling and other things, and I think it had the promise of becoming an ATS. So when you think about that, it didn't offer some of the core, workflow and things that people associate with an ATS. That'd be fine for a really small employer that only hires a couple people a year. They're not buying ATSs anyhow, right? They don't need an ATS for that. But we had actually seen customers leaving Google who had, maybe they're, 100, 200, 500 employees with a little more volume, high growth or something. So I want to say I was surprised, but maybe I was, not as disappointed as I would have been. If you remember when Salesforce, they bought a company called Ripple, performance management app. And when that happened, I was like out saying, oh my God, this is it. Salesforce is coming, game over. They're going to take over everything. Everybody uses Salesforce. And then it never happened. And I kind of learned, my lesson there. And if you think about Microsoft, they've got LinkedIn, they've got talent solutions in Dynamics, but we don't see them making a huge effort in the space. It's a combination of the complexity and the I guess the size of the market. They've got a lot bigger fish to fry, I think. So that was, I know there are a lot of employers who are probably feeling that sting because they're going to have to find another solution. Yeah, they were at HR Tech, I think in 2017. Google had a booth, and that was it. They were one and done as far as promoting their stuff goes. But
I think, George, I agree with you. I think in the post-mortem of this, it's a reminder that you can't always be all things to all people. And if you're going to approach a problem, you should probably involve as much of a holistic team as possible to solve that challenge, because the Google product probably was something designed by engineers who see HR from their perspective, and who knows what degree of consulting was done by practitioners. And so I've seen that in other areas where you try to solve a problem, but it's from your vantage point, and there's one or two missing pieces in that could have made it a more substantial product that may have had a longer shelf life. So I think it's just a lesson learned. You can't be all things to all people. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, do any of your staffing firm clients have they used Google for Hire? Do you know?
I hadn't heard of anyone. And we hear a lot of different, staffing software programs. So nobody that I had heard had used Google Hire. I mean, switching ATS is a pain. I like to say it's worse than moving sometimes, but that might be why people didn't switch. So if they got to switch back, they're not happy to begin with. On top of that,
Yeah, I'd hate to be an ATS salesperson today. I mean, it's a nightmare. It seems like a nightmare sale to try and make.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people still need an ATS though. You still need it. I haven't seen anybody come to market with anything that doesn't solve or that I should say, I haven't seen anybody come to market with anything that would replace the core database. Because you got to have it. If you're of any size, you've got to have that system of record.
Yeah. Jeremy says they're super sticky once they're in, right? So once you have the ATS in there, then as a client, you're pretty golden there, because it's that switching pain is it's way too high for most companies overall. So
yeah.
And even if it's like hurting them too, I talked to a company a couple months ago, and I was telling them, look, your ATS is not doing any favors right now. It's the apply process is clunky. It doesn't work properly on mobile. And they're like, yeah, we know, but we can't change. It's just too much of a pain. So I'm like, well, this is the world we live in now.
Yeah.
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 It's a shame because ATSs don't seem to, once they get that client, they're like, they don't iterate anymore, and they don't kind of improve the product at that point. It's all about just keeping them on the existing technology or whatever, but another story, I guess. So the LinkedIn news, HiQ won a lawsuit against them, so now they can scrape data, and I think it's a good win for the little guy out there. As a job seeker, as a candidate, whatever, I want my information everywhere if I have that opportunity, right? So I think what's going to happen here is that LinkedIn's going to force people to basically check off the fact that, hey, do you want your information scraped by other third-party web apps or whatever? And I think that's coming down the line. So you guys have any thoughts on the decision?
I think that's a good point, Chris, because there was a article on ERE that I read. It was I think it was Marcy Mull from Korn Ferry, and she talked about how that could be the unintended consequence was we put info into LinkedIn or wherever, and only expect it on LinkedIn. So some kind of opt-in to share makes a lot of sense.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that. I think that does make a lot of sense. Is it over? I'm not an expert on that lawsuit, but does LinkedIn not have a path? Because I would imagine they're.
I mean, I think they're going to appeal it, whatever. Yeah. But I think that even if they tried to appeal, I think it would be struck down. I don't know, because I think that information wants to be free, and the ruling said that LinkedIn does not own your personal information that you put on the platform, and so if that's the case, I think that's going to stand as just a general rule of law going forward. If we own our data, right? I don't see them taking away that aspect from us as the actual user.
Well, if you're making it public, and that's, I don't think we know these things. This is our world, but I'm certain that the general consumer has no idea what's happening to their data when they make their profile public on LinkedIn. How many systems it can end up in, and and it's not just used for recruiting either. LinkedIn is used for B2B sales and a little bit of consumer marketing. So, where does that line? The line doesn't stop at recruiting.
Yeah. So I'm curious if this is going to LinkedIn put out that list of extensions that they banned essentially. What's going to happen with that now? Are they still going to block users from using those? Put you in LinkedIn jail? I mean, there's still a lot to be determined here as far as the future of this overall.
Yeah, Chris, I think that LinkedIn, for lack of a better, phraseology, it's become the new phone book, right? And so you can't necessarily hide public information that people are willingly providing. And I don't think anyone these days that's on the internet has any expectation of privacy when you're willingly giving information to one party. I just can't see anyone who expects their data to stay in LinkedIn I know there are bad actors out there, but that's just the risk you take of accessing public systems.
Jeremy's got some good points here. He knows probably more than most about the terms of service at LinkedIn, given his background.
Yeah, public information is more commoditized than ever. IQ1. He says there's 40 million Facebook phone numbers on the dark web. The price will go down. Chrome extensions will be popping up. When Zuckerberg said it's possibly our data was crawled from Facebook this year, and everyone freaked out. Yeah, I was shocked. TOS violation. Public doesn't realize it. Yep, no, we're wrong.
Yeah.
The other, big tech company in the news was Facebook this month because they pulled back on their advertising platform. So, Matt, I'm curious to hear from you around this because I know you guys do a lot of Facebook marketing. How has this impacted your business there?
They're my best friend and my worst enemy at times. We pretty much had to change all of our campaigns because kind of behind the scenes is to advertise on Facebook with employment, credit, or housing. Now you have to check a box at the beginning of your campaign setup, and then that triggers the Facebook advertising system into a different almost interface to where your targeting options are much more limited. So you can only target on 15 mile minimum radius. You can't really target on all of those interests as much, so it's much.
They take away job titles.
Job titles, not really. Like you can only do some interests. Like healthcare is one that's tough right now. Is like healthcare. Like there's not really a healthcare category even to target. It's there might be a warehouse category or somebody job hunting like that, but you can't do job titles, or you could do anything in the past. Like if you were advertising non-employment right now, if you were advertising just a regular product, you could target based on any of those interests, parental status, income, marital, if you have kids, those types of things. So now it's very limited because some people were, showing job ads to just 30 to 40-year-olds because that's what they wanted to hire. And once there were some lawsuits out there from Communication Workers of America and other areas, Facebook decided to really pull it back from anyone instead of, just making sure everybody followed the compliance correctly.
Yeah, I think it's a shame, man. It's that platform is now less valuable to advertisers overall. And I think I was talking to Chad Sowash, and he said, there's already a mechanism in the government to crack down on illegal advertising. It's called the EEOC. Mm-hmm. So why these companies are going after Facebook for this when they're just a platform that you can advertise on, to me doesn't seem correct and doesn't seem right overall. And I think it's a lose-lose for the employers out there who do use it for advertising for jobs. And, it's now it's a less valuable tool they have. And the ROI in there is just not going to be there anymore.
So when you said you could only search on a 15-mile radius, you can't search on a broader, larger radius, or
that was the minimum? Yeah,
the minimum. Okay,
that's now the minimum. In the past, you could do zip codes. You could exclude certain areas. You could go down to sometimes 1 mile, but usually like 10 miles, but really get very targeted. But now it's minimum of 15, but you can definitely do bigger.
Okay.
Has it increased the cost of the clicks?
We haven't seen that yet. It's only been since about a month. But I think the ROI is definitely gonna be harder. You're a more general audience. You can still use the same tactics and whatnot, but I think the best tactic right now that we've always said is to export your email database and upload that into Facebook and target those people.
As an audience, custom audience.
Yeah, and really try to reactivate them. Those are the people that have been in that database that might be in the cobwebs of some company, but maybe they were silver medalists a few years ago or 5 years ago, and it's time to get back in front of them because they're ready for a new job. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah. All right. Let's move on here. So, Joey, let's talk about the AB5 law in California about the gig workers. Let me just read a couple things first, and then I want to get your comments on this. Well, actually, Joey, just explain briefly what the law says now, if you could.
Sure. So very briefly, AB5 is a new bill that was signed in California that seeks to challenge the gig worker economy It's going to challenge not only the individual, but the business models that are built on these platforms. Business models like Lyft, Uber, Grubhub. And those are kind of the faces of this thing. But really, it's going to challenge the way that people are classified as workers, moving more people from the independent contractor column to the employee column. And I'll open it up to everyone's thoughts on it. But
Okay.
I think that it's overreach. I think that it's moving too far too fast. I think that there are quite a few people that I would say for the most part look to these kinds of opportunities to be more entrepreneurial and be flexible with their time. But when you start classifying people as employees, there are certain constraints that are going to make people say, well, why did I do this opportunity in the first place? I could have just used Alexa to apply to McDonald's and just work there, you know. So
Yeah.
I think it's a bit overreach. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, where it goes across state lines. A notable new category of employee that will be W-2 is a stripper. They are not exempt from this new ABC test. So that's a fun fact.
Fun facts. There's a quote here from this one guy. It says, "This is one of the few times in recent history when so many people will be impacted by a single decision," said Ryan Vett, an entrepreneur and gig economy expert who founded Boon, which is an on-demand healthcare platform. He said he sees positives and negatives in the new law that is good for the workers, but will also implode the gig economy as we know it today with increased costs. And I tend to agree with him. I mean, I'm a freelancer myself, and I don't want to have to be, forced into a certain classification of worker. I want that flexibility overall. And to me, this is way overreach. It's going to increase costs for some companies. There was the truckers are in California complaining because truckers are independent workers. They're basically 1099ers.
Yep.
And this would force them to go to work for whatever employer that they're being used by overall. So, but George and Matt, you guys have any additional thoughts on this?
So I have thoughts, but I was curious, Joe, you seem to know more about the details of the bill than I do. So did it just go on job types and categories, or so it I'm used to you're looking at the amount of money you're paying someone and the hours that they're working. And then there is a job type, but you could be any job type. And if you're earning less than a certain amount and working under a certain number of hours, you're clearly not a full-time employee. This just says if you're in these job categories, you need to be treated as an employee. Is that right?
Yeah, it's less about compensation amount and the type of work that you're doing, and then the constraints that surround the type of work that you're doing. There's the actual ABC test. Part of it is, do you control the hours that you work? Do you participate in the business's main source of revenue? And then there's a third thing there. I'll search really quickly. And so this is really it's like an open funnel to get more people into the employee category, and then you determine whether they're part-time or full-time. So it's less about paying them part-time or full-time. It's more about just getting them in that bucket to begin with. And I think one of the reasons behind it is that you solidify a tax base. When you have these systems and structures in place for you to have your payroll deductions, to contribute to workers' comp, to contribute to disability, it undergirds governmental systems. It undergirds that ecosystem. Whereas with a 1099 employee, you do self-govern yourself to the amount of tax that you pay, and how well you play into the system of government and tax.
Right. Well, and there are protections that they get if they move into that category as well. So I mean, it's not all bad, but it's it's tough because when you look at a lot of the gig workers, it's, that's not what I consider contingent work, right? Like a contractor or a freelancer, Chris, to your point. Gig workers are sort of opportunistic and on demand, and generally working across a few different platforms. Most Ubers that pull up have a Lyft sticker these days. And I feel, I'm kind of torn, right? I think, making sure that these individuals aren't exploited, and that they have an opportunity if they're working for one company and they're putting in more than full-time hours. I feel like or an appropriate number of hours. I feel that they should have access to the same kinds of protections that anybody else, working would have. But I think there's a way to do it without, like impacting the truckers who, nobody was complaining about that situation a couple of weeks ago. That seemed to be set, or contractors who it sounds like will have some issues out of this as well.
Joe, you had a point before we were talking live that people like the fact that they're freelancers. They feel like entrepreneurs in a sense, right?
Yeah. You feel like you are your own boss. You're just using this tool to launch your empire. And I think of the complexity of this. How many individuals who may have re-entered the workforce after incarceration, or are in between jobs, and they're looking for something that's quick and easy, and they don't have to go through the hiring process. There's so many different categories of workers that are just trying to get that income from the gig, hence the term gig economy, that whether it's a long-term solution for them or it's a short-term Band-Aid, I think it makes this a little bit more complicated than it looks on paper. There are a few exceptions. I'll just call them out, some of them out really quickly. Psychologists, dentists, commercial fishermen, human resources professionals, travel agents, photographers, cartoonists. So there are some categories that could be considered gig or freelance or independent contractor that did petition and make their way into the exemptions category, but there are a lot that did not make it into it. So some people are breathing easy right away, but others may have to fight to get that.
Here's what Uber says. Uber's general counsel, Tony West, argues that a driver's work is outside the usual course of Uber's business, which is serving as a technology platform for several different types of digital marketplaces. Therefore, he noted drivers will not be automatically reclassified as employees even after this law goes into effect in January 2020 overall. So they're definitely going to fight this. And I don't know what's going to happen here. It's going to be a really interesting set of circumstances here for some of these companies.
Yeah, I saw the current CEO of Uber just the other night, being interviewed on NPR, and he mentioned that fact that they feel as though they won't have to classify these drivers in that way. But he also went on to say that they're implementing some benefits and perks for the drivers that will give them access to some things like workers' comp and things that whether he specifically said workers' comp, I can't remember, but he seemed to be leaning toward providing for this large population of drivers that they have, if they're interested in accessing things like benefits or benefits like services. So I think it's going to be really hard for them to say that providing rides isn't their core business. But I'm no lawyer, so yeah. I think they use technology to enable their core business, which is moving people and now they move food and other things. but I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah, I feel like we need a gig worker bill of rights or something like that, that the kind of the government gets behind and becomes a sort of a default classification. And I would love to have like a, for me as a freelancer, one thing that holds me back sometimes is the cost of healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I had a way to pay into a government type of program, I would love something like that as a freelancer overall. I'm a one-man company, and it's it's definitely tough sometimes with the way healthcare is today. So, but some kind of bill of rights for people like us, I think, is something that the industry needs to talk about more. All right, let's move on to let's talk about HR tech. George, I think I saw I was following a Twitter stream on TA Tech this week, and did you talk about the investments going on?
I did, yeah. I spoke. I gave a update for TA Tech on the VC and growth capital coming into the industry.
So give us the high level. What are the numbers here that you've been tracking?
Okay, so the high level is year to date, so calendar 2019, as of earlier this morning. I haven't looked in the last couple hours. 4.18 billion across 170 deals. That's year to date. Looking at the categories, core HR did just over 2 billion. Talent acquisition did about 1.5 billion, and the balance in talent management. When I look at let me go to the last 3 years. It's an interesting number. Where are we from? I started tracking in January 2017, pulling all this stuff together. We've done over 9 billion across 600 deals, and the breakdown categorically is about the same. Talent acquisition had about 3.4 billion, HCM 3.9, and talent management about 2. So a lot of deals, a lot of activity. Q3 this is calendar Q3, a little not quite as much as we had done in Q1 or Q2. If you were to look from Q1 of 2018 through Q2, it was just a steep climb. Q3 dips a little, but on an annual basis, in 3 quarters, we've already done what we did last year. So Cheeseman and I were going back and forth. Not back, we had two things back and forth, but he was saying it's just a canary in the coal mine, and my perspective is it's interesting to look at VC to see on a quarterly basis to see what deals are flowing, but I'm not sure you look at VC on a quarterly basis to evaluate the financial aspect of it. So on an annual basis, things are moving along. Now, if next quarter we flattened out, I think it may be a reflection of some investors hedging their bets a little bit. But with $1 billion, if we're doing a $4 billion, $5 billion year, it's hard to say we don't have crazy amounts of money coming into the space. So still plugging away with the biggest category, still month in, month out, quarter in, quarter out. It's job boards and marketplaces. They did about 600 million this year, and over the last 3 years, 1.8 billion. So
yeah, I mean, there's probably some big deals in there too. I think it's probably like 10 or 12 companies that comprise about $1 billion just themselves. The Jobcase deal was better up at 60 million, something like that. It's just these large amounts are really staggering, it seems like. And is there a bubble here? I mean, to me, has anything changed in recruiting and HR of these last couple of years with all this new technology? It seems like to me, most companies can't get the basics right. But yet we're still building all this new tech for them to try and use. I don't know. It's just maybe I'm jaded, but
yeah, Well, first off, VC investment doesn't equate to success. It's a milestone. Look at what's happening in the market with WeWork. Look at what's happening with Uber. There are many other examples, and there's just a culture that's been created where we're sort of drunk on VC, right? These companies aren't really chasing profitability. They're chasing market share, looking at potentially going public, looking at the stock market, looking down the road before they start to worry about profitability. And that's where some of the challenges with things like Uber and WeWork come into play, when suddenly you're in a position where you have to immediately look to the core of your business, and you've been just, it's all investment, and you're subsidizing what you're providing the market with that VC. That's a scary place to be when either the market turns. But it takes, I've been in the industry a long time, and it takes a good 5 years, 7 years when a technology enters the market for us to be at a place where we know how we're going to use it. Look at we had a big conversation today about some social platforms, how we're using Facebook, what's up with the LinkedIn decision. If we were having the conversation we were having 7-8 years ago were, how should we be using this? And a lot of the initial assumptions about what we could do with these platforms and where the platforms were at the time, it was, we were really early. A lot of startups came in that were social recruiting applications, and what they look like today is very different than what they looked like then. It's going to happen with AI and machine learning and process automation, right? That's what's been flooding into the market the last year or so. We're figuring out how to use it. Like this McDonald's Alexa thing, that's pretty cool. Is that what it's going to look like? Or is it going to look different? Will you be able to apply completely via voice assistance? Will people use it? We don't know. So a lot of the VC model is based on only 10% of their investments being successful. So that answers your question right there, right? 90% of them are going to either get acquired, or when the market turns, they may not be around any longer. Their IP may get acquired, or they may just evaporate.
We just had a one in Deadpool this week. Uncommon closed up shop after blowing $18 million in 18 months.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
that one really blows my mind. I mean, for a small company like that to blow that kind of money in a year and a half, that's pretty crazy. And these investors need to do a better job, I think, at vetting some of these founders, particularly because it's HR and it's a different beast than tech, I think, than regular tech overall, in terms of selling into it overall.
There was one vendor, I can't think of their name. It was last year, maybe the end of the year prior. They came into the market. They had a first round. They were, just as wide-eyed and full of hubris as every startup that enters the market. They raised a second round, and then like 3 months later, they announced, we're done, and they gave the money back. Oh. They whatever they had, they actually put out an announcement that said, this is harder than we thought it was going to be. And I thought, that may feel like a failure, but good on you for realizing you're going to impact a bunch of customers and a bunch of people's lives in a negative way if you hold on. So that's very, very, no pun intended, that's very uncommon, but it's that's the only time I've heard a story like that.
Interesting. Nice. All right, guys. Well, I guess we kind of wrap this up. It's been a good 45 minutes here. I guess we'll just end with a quick note from each of you. Tell us where you're going to be next, or plug your company, or just let's do a quick shout off here. Joey, I'll see you next week.
Yep, I'll see you next week in Vegas at HR Tech, and then I'll be traveling to Bulgaria actually to do a keynote and training. So first international speaking engagement. Pretty excited about that. And where Jumpstart's going is more of the same, just helping small businesses navigate this tricky HR market, and more podcasting over at the Business Life and Coffee podcast. And I'll drop that link in the chat.
Cool, man. Cool, man. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Chris, thanks for having me, man.
Matt?
I'll be at Staffing World, which is America Staffing Association's big annual conference in Las Vegas in a couple weeks. I'll be talking there at their tech park for the second year on programmatic advertising. And you can catch us on Secrets of Staffing Success. My coworker, Brad Biley, and I talk about, employer branding, recruitment marketing every other week. And then our other episode is from Todd on our team, Todd Lewandowski. He interviews somebody in the industry. So I'll throw that podcast link in the chat window as well. And had a good time here on the inaugural edition.
Nice. Well, good to have you, Matt.
Cool.
And George, where are you going to be next?
Next, I'll be at Unleash World in Paris, October 22nd and 23rd, I think. And you can always catch me at hrwins.com, and the podcast is the HR Market Watch. So I'll have the Q3 closes, and I'll have the roll up, any additional numbers to the ones we talked about. October 1st or 2nd, it'll be live on HR Wins.
Nice. Awesome. Well, it's good to have all you guys today for the first HR Pod Squad. Glad we did this, and we'll be sure to tune in next month for the next one. I'm Chris Russell from the RecTech Podcast. So check me out there. And also go to hrpodcasters.com to see all kinds of shows in the HR space overall. So with that, we'll call it an afternoon, and have a good weekend, guys.
All right.
You too. Thanks.
Take care.
All right, guys. Take care.